are certain people, and he's right at the top of this group, who almost anything they do provokes. And there's something about his engagement with the world that the work is always provocative. Everything he makes is high temperature. There's nothing lukewarm about it. It's just not possible for Andre Serrano to make a lukewarm picture.
The thing that is most distinctive about Serrano is this mixture of beauty and lushness with usually a transgressive subject matter. All of them are incredibly rich, very beautiful, exciting images, and yet when you look at them, you say, oh my God, what am I looking at?
Andre is often more attracted to things and people that are more marginal or have been undervalued within mainstream culture, and he's wanting to present these ideas to us or to audiences as having value through the way that his images seduce people to then come into the work and come into the ideas of the images.
I've always felt like an outsider, even as an artist. You know, a lot of people see me as an established artist, and I am established, but I don't have carte blanche acceptability in the art world. There's a lot of people who hate my guts, but I like being in that position. I like being, you know, still on the outside, even after all these years. This is Williamsburg, and we're in front of the building where I grew up. I didn't grow up with a whole lot of culture or art around my house, so I think, you know, I think the first time I was really exposed to art was through school, visits to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I'm not exactly sure when I first decided to become an artist. I went to the Brooklyn Museum Art School when I was 17, and I was living with a girl who owned a camera. So I started using her camera, always with the idea that I was an artist, a conceptual artist, and that I would be using a camera instead of a paintbrush. After art school, there were many years when I stopped making any pictures. I was doing drugs, and I felt like I couldn't serve two masters at once. I abandoned my art career until much later in my 30s, when I finally was able to get rid of my demons.
When Andre and I met, some of the photographs that he was taking were more documentary, you know, to shooting things that he saw. And it was in that, probably around 81, 82, he started talking to me about his desire to shoot the images that are in his head. And this was the way he put it, that he wanted to take images that came in through his imagination and construct tableaus in order to actually photograph those. There's an image called Crucifixion, which is a crucifix that's made out of meat bones that's hanging on a wall, which has one of these sort of backdrop colors that Andre's become known for. Clearly, he has a history, a personal history that's rooted in Catholicism.
When I was a kid in Williamsburg, I remember my mother would take me to church, and I didn't really think about my religious background or Catholicism until 20 years later, when I started to do what I regard as my early work, that I was drawn to using religion as a subject matter. It's because I'm a Christian that I can use the symbols of the church in the way that I do.
The fact that Andre chose to use bodily fluids, blood and piss and milk, as materials for his image making in the 80s has to be seen in relation to the fact that this was a period politically when public morality was being debated and attacked from various sectors.
In the late 1980s, Serrano created a great deal of controversy due to his Piss Christ.
Piss Christ was the first immersion. Some writer coined that term to describe the images where I actually put objects into the liquids.
I remember being really struck just looking at this image and just being wowed by it, because it had such a atmosphere in it. To my mind, it was transcendental. It transcended the work that he'd been doing previously.
So Piss Christ actually was created in '87, and nothing happened until 2 years later.
The NEA, a government organization, had sponsored the traveling exhibition in which his photograph was shown. And people felt that this was not an appropriate use of public funds.
His work was becoming sort of a football that then was bandied about.
The height of the controversy was when Alphonse D'Amato,
On the congressional floor, he tore up
The catalog with Piss Christ in it and said, "This is junk."
Think about being denigrated in Congress, telling you, we don't like what you're doing, you don't have a right to do it.
It was a media circus and a political circus, and it had nothing to do with my work or with me.
When the hoopla started, Andre became famous and infamous overnight.
I remember reading an editorial in the New York Times where they said, Robert Mapplethorpe, he may be gay, and you may not like that, but he's an artist. But a crucifix in urine, what were they thinking? And so I felt that, after Mapplethorpe was dragged into the mess, then it became more of a cause for the art world.
There were a lot of people that really didn't want Andre Serrano to make another image.
And so I've learned that my work sometimes, once it leaves the studio and goes out into the real world, it may have reactions that I didn't quite anticipate.
Je m'appelle Yvon Lambert, j'ai une galerie à Paris depuis environ 40 ans. Andrés Serrano, j'ai fait ma première exposition en 91. Il est très connu en France. La rétrospective qui est à Avignon actuellement, donc jusqu'à fin mars, je crois, est une rétrospective avec 160 photos, donc c'est vraiment une des plus importantes expositions rétrospectives sur l'œuvre de Andrés Serrano.
This is actually the first time that I've had a moment to look at the work without being hurried, without having dozens of people around me asking me questions. And being able to look at the work for a few minutes, it just makes me proud that the exhibition looks so good, but also it makes me realize how much work I've done, and yet it's still not enough. There's a lot more work inside of me that I should do. Bring it back a little bit. I wish we could tell the women to please dress up a little bit. He looks very theatrical. He looks very theatrical.
Because they told us it's here.
Yeah, but
so I thought this was interesting, but here, no, it's not interesting.
Well, I'm going to cut you off right here.
Yes, I know, I see.
Even a hat is good.
I have some hats.
So we're here at the Comédie Française, where I've been invited to photograph the company. Makes all the difference in the world. Thank you. You look great. I'm going to attempt to photograph 42 people in 8 days. And it's a great honor to be invited to do this because there is a tradition, a history of artists painting the portraits of the actors over the last 3 centuries. Perfecto. But it's been 50 years, I think, since any of the actors in the company have been portrayed in any way. And so for me, it's just a serious undertaking that I've been asked to do in the name of the Comédie Française.
La Comédie Française, c'est le plus vieux théâtre de France, puisqu'il a été créé en 1680 par Louis XIV, qui a réuni toutes les troupes qui jouaient en français à Paris. Et cette Comédie Française s'est perpétrée au cours des siècles. Elle a été consolidée dans ses statuts par Napoléon Ier. Et depuis, ce théâtre a traversé toutes les crises, toutes les guerres, et existe toujours. C'est donc la plus vieille troupe de France.
I find it a little ironic that being a foreigner, not being French, that I've been asked to do this. But I think I've gotten into the spirit of things very quickly. I saw immediately the grandeur of the project, and that's how I've embraced it. And sometimes outsiders can see things as they really are. I see myself as a studio artist. I do setups in in a studio. And, but that means the studio could be anywhere. The studio could be in a morgue. The studio could be in a church. I like to use real people, the real dead people, real Klans people, real church people. The thing is, it's not documentary or photojournalism because I take them out of their natural context and put them into an artificial environment, meaning the studio. And even though I like to use the real thing, I like to do it in a sort of artificial or tableau setting. What I especially like about the morgue is there's a sort of quiet in the room. You know, it's a sort of work that it's almost like there's a stillness, like you can hear a pin drop. That's a quality that I try to get in all of my work, the sense of stillness, that you are there with the person by yourself. Why the morgue? Why anything? Basically for one reason and one reason alone. Because I could. That's why I do anything, because I could, because I was able to do it. I believe in shooting first and thinking about it later. You know, it's like, I'll do the work. If I like it, I'll show it. If I don't, I won't. I remember when I photographed the Klan, I met a Klansman who said to me, do you know anything about the Klan? And I said, no, not really. And he tried to give me some information. But that's always what my attitude is. I'm an outsider. I don't know much about the Klan. I don't know much about death. And so I sort of see myself much like the audience. I see them as outsiders, lay people who don't know much about the subject matter, but they're curious and they're interested. And most important, they want to see it close up. And that's exactly how I feel. I feel like I do the work for myself. And hopefully, though, I know that when I'm doing something that is of interest to me, I know that there are going to be other people who are going to also be interested in looking at it.
Delighted to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Yes, yes. Very, very slowly. My side.
Do you think that her dress is crooked?
Not move at all. That head.
I like you straight. You look very good straight ahead.
Completely straight?
I think I can, yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'm very proud of this one. This is Blood on the Flag. And this was done 4 days after September 11th. And this represents to me what had happened. About a month later, I started my work, America. One of the things that I felt about September 11th was that the country had been attacked by people who perceived us as the enemy. And so I attempted to show what America is. I wanted to portray not only the characters or the symbols of September 11th, the soldier, the police, the anthrax scare, the postal worker, but also the people who make up America, the professions, the doctor, the nurse, the cowboy. From there, I went on to represent different aspects of America, such as mother or child on welfare, a World War II hero, you know, a churchgoer. Last but not least, the celebrities. B.B. King, Arthur Miller, Larry Flint. America consists of 112 portraits, and I say I could have done 1,000 or 2,000 portraits, and I still wouldn't get to the real America. And of course, the question is, who's America? And since I'm the artist, it's my America. What I like about working with actors is that they give me something from within that they have, something that I don't have to ask for, you know, whereas with regular models, sometimes you have to direct them. With these actors, I felt like I didn't really need to direct them.
C'est formidable parce que pour la première fois de ma vie, j'ai eu l'impression que je n'aime pas beaucoup être pris en photo, comme beaucoup d'acteurs. Là, j'ai eu l'impression que ça ne m'appartenait pas du tout. On ne me demandait rien, pas de faire une grimace, pas de regarder là, etc. Donc on se sent absolument libre devant l'objectif et c'est assez rare. Et je trouve ça très bien.
Moi, j'ai toujours très peur des séances de photos, parce que j'ai une relation tumultueuse avec l'image arrêtée. Je ne m'imagine qu'en mouvement. Et donc, je redoutais, j'ai toujours redouté les séances photos. Et j'ai trouvé ça infiniment respectueux et doux, voilà, c'est le mot qui me vient, du coup très agréable, voilà. J'ai pas eu le sentiment d'être, comme ça a pu m'arriver souvent, d'être violentée par la présence de cet objectif.
These people seem to have a lot of things going on inside of them, and it comes out in the photographs. You can see it.
C'est assez peu habituel d'avoir des visages aussi crus, aussi durement photographiés, d'aussi près. Mais c'est intéressant parce que c'est pas des photos d'acteurs, c'est pas des photos de théâtre dont on a l'habitude avec maquillage, avec l'expression, etc. Une espèce de technique sans doute de sa part de recommencer pour pister, aller chercher, je ne sais pas trop quoi, mais l'humanité des gens ressort d'une manière très vraie, très forte comme ça.
Well, you know, I'm trying to get, if not into their psyche, I'm trying to get a moment where I feel and it's a privileged moment when they allow me to go inside of them and to show them for who they really are.
You spend us time tomorrow.
Thank you.
Oh.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
It's 9:50, right?
Believe it or not, this guy, I think, is kind of far away.
He was far away.
And I hate to call him back. Well, now that I've finished actually, taking the pictures, I now look at the pictures, meaning I get them back, I edit. Last night, I was up till 6 in the morning editing the work and looking at it because I want to make sure I've got it. I can't sleep until I know that it's in the bag.
I've been working with Andre Serrano for the Times Magazine for actually probably going on 10 years. One of the main goals for us is how do you do something different? How do you try to reinvent the form a little? How do you try to come up with something that will make readers spend more than a second or two staring down that photo? How do you do that? You go to somebody like Andre Serrano. He is in total command of the page so that if he makes a portrait, there's something profoundly present. They're not shy pictures. That's what makes them, I think, great for the magazine, that they are extremely distinctive and bold.
The thing that makes me feel good is that someone will call me up and say, listen, I saw that picture you did for the New York Times Magazine, and I knew it was yours before I even read the credit.
In 2005, I called Andres to do a series of conceptual photos for us to go with a cover story about torture, because I felt like he would make very stark, memorable pictures of the idea of torture, whether it's the plastic cuffs that are used. This was a picture of a form of border torture. It's a very haunting image.
As an artist, I try to make work that can't be ignored, something that sticks with you. You see it once and you remember it again.
We were having dinner and Irina said that my hands were perfect for the torture photographs. Andre asked me if I wanted to be a model, but then it transcended to like a bag on my head and water pouring down my face. But it was all done safely and I wasn't harmed at all. I've been printing Andres' work since 1990. It's a big responsibility to make his prints. This is his body of work. In everything, I think Andrew has evolved. He's highly technical. He has also changed his subject matter 180 degrees. At the same time, he has developed a better sense of like lighting, color, and all that stuff. But I think that comes with time and like assurance of what you know, what you're looking for. This is a photograph from the Morgue series, and it's called Killed by 4 Great Danes. They're a little bit difficult to print in the sense just for the visual, just for what they are. This one is the most, I find this beautiful. It's like the most graphic, but then the other one's a little bit hard to. But then in the end, I'm just looking at sections of the image. I'm just looking at color. I'm not looking at the whole print by itself. I'm not seeing the scars or the goriness of it in some of them. It just becomes like an object, a composition, like the color here, the flesh tone here, and I'm over it. The printing for Andrew is very straightforward. We pretty much reproduce what he gets on film. Like when he was doing the Comédie Française here, I pointed out, for example, on this image that you can see the wig line on this woman, and he says that's the way she presented herself, and that's the way the moment was, and that's the way he wants it.
Andres is one of my first clients, so I've been working with him probably since 1985. So I remember really distinctly we'd made the frames, and I would put them into I had a little pickup truck. We'd bring him over to his loft in near the Manhattan Bridge in Brooklyn, and he and his wife at the time would put pictures in. Well, we framed from every series of work, from the very beginning, the early works, through the Immersion series, and all the way through. And we always seem to be up until the last minute before a show or before an export. This went relatively smoothly because these are the first C prints that Andres has ever made. It's a different technology, different chemistry than what he usually uses. And Andres has never wanted to move to C prints because of the results that he's always gotten in Cibachrome. So the prints themselves were easier to make. Also, the mounts somehow all went really, really well. I just think because we had a really hard time with the last show, I think it was just our turn to have a really easy experience, so we had it. Of course, the Comédie Française project, on one level, they are portraits, as in Molière's time. I think this series would be at the level of a known painter painting portraits of these people, because so much more is coming through these images and just, they're not headshots. They all have like this kind of spiritual glow to them. They all are backdropped in a way, taken out of an ordinary environment, very much the same way as the statues were, floating in urine. I don't think that these portraits of the Comédie Française are more portraits or less portraits than Piss Christ is. I think there's a total continuum between all the work.
You had asked earlier what my favorite images are when I create them. And I'd say my favorite picture is always my last one.
C'est une vraie personnalité unique, authentique, et qui a sa place comme ça, tout seul, mais il fait partie de la scène de l'art contemporain américaine et internationale.
Andres Serrano has a place in the history of art. Not everyone who is controversial makes history.
Artists have an ability to get at something in the culture there and touch a nerve that people connect with, and he does it always. So no matter what new body of work, he's got an ability. And it's not about choosing sensational subject matter. It goes deeper than that.
Andre is, like most artists, is developing and shifting and changing his whole life. So some audiences have expected, okay, what's next from Serrano? I don't think he wants to do the expected.
There are some people who always expect me to be controversial and provocative, and that's not necessarily how I feel, and so I don't need to do that. But I don't think I've mellowed at all. And, you know, even though my subject matter might vary and look different, and the work may not be as provocative sometimes, I still have a lot of provocation inside of me. You have to realize that I think the work comes from the same place all the time. And so just because we have moments of calm doesn't mean that there isn't a storm up ahead.